Heritage Church. This church is designed in the Gothic style and is wood framed and clad in wood as well. The Gothic characteristics of the church are the tall bell tower, the very steeply pitched roof, and the pointed arched windows. This church was built in 1892. The bell tower never actually had a bell. Bells are expensive, the congregation was small, and I guess they never had the resources to put a bell in. But it was observed in 1950s that the tower was leaning a little precariously, so it was taken down and replaced with a simpler tower design. And it wasn't until 1984 when students with the School of Architecture, with the UBC, volunteered to do as a project to redesign and build a new tower and steeple very close to the original tower design. During the restoration of the building, the pews were strengthened and restored to their natural condition. All of the woodwork you see, including the floors, were sanded and refinished. So the pews are original to the church. They've recently been oiled to bring up the wood luster, and they're rounded, so it creates a nice, intimate feeling with the congregation. Another early feature is this 1940s furnace, which is no longer used. The external chimney was removed in 1984, and today we have the comfort of furnaces and air conditioners to make it a pleasant environment. If we peek inside, what do we see? A wood stove. Early photographs show that the wood stove, raised on concrete blocks, and then pipes ran close to the ceiling to heat the church. The original windows were removed, repaired, and resealed with putty, and the broken glass and stained glass and so on was replaced with clear glass. The plain glass originally had a white paint surface on it to sort of give the impression of sort of a diffused light. In the last few years, the windows have again been restored. Each pane has been removed. The mullions have been repaired and sanded and painted, and the new wavy glass, the older type glass with its little imperfections, was sourced and put back in. The thing I like about the wavy glass is that it seems, when the light shines through, it seems to sparkle a little bit. The north window was closed up when the Reed Hall was built off to the north side of the church in the 1950s. When the Heritage Society took over the site, the hall was turned into a caretaker's unit until MacGyver House was moved to the back of the site in late 1994. Lois Garrett was the first caretaker, and after her, Fran and Ray Helgeson were the caretakers, and they lived here for 22 years until they retired. They helped design the English-style country garden and planted and maintained all the gardens on this 10-acre site. At the front of the church, you can see here a pump organ that was built in 1904 and donated to the church in 1914. It was repaired in 1987, but is rarely used. We do have a piano that can be used by people who rent the hall. The pulpit is also original to the as is the rector's chair, which is in the foyer. The first minister was Reverend Paul Langhill, who lived in Vernon and traveled 35 miles by horseback or wagon from Vernon to Kelowna on Saturday night. He'd give a Sunday morning service here in Kelowna and then trek back to Vernon for a Sunday evening service. So quite a trek. Now, inside the church, you can see these doors just to the left of the altar, and they would have been the original doors, entry doors to the church. This would have been the extent of the church here. They now open to a foyer, which is the main entrance that we use today. Although there is an intimate feeling here, the tall vaulted ceilings create kind of a feeling of awe, as if you're in the presence of God. These walls had to have all the lath and plaster taken off, be insulated and replaced with gyprock. But the size and the shape of this church building makes for excellent acoustics. There have been many musical groups that have performed here. People singing hymns or folk music or classical music or sing-alongs. It's a small space, but because the acoustics are so good, musicians love this space. The church was originally called the Bethel Presbyterian Church, and in 1925 became the Bethel United Church, until it closed in 1964. However, because the main focus of the population moved from Benvoulin Road to where downtown Kelowna is now by the lake, the congregation shrank somewhat, and the second Presbyterian church was built in 1898 downtown. This was followed by the second Knox United Church, built in 1909-1910 at the corner of Richter and Bernard. This Benvoulin Heritage Church ceased to function as a church in 1964, and it was followed by a youth center which operated out of this building until 1976. Then the building was neglected until 1984. The sad story is that this church was almost burned in 1981. It had fallen into such disrepair by this time that the fire marshal had requested that, to use this building for fire practice. Goosegan House, built in 1881, was also suffering neglect. But the good news is some notable citizens, led by Dr. Walter Anderson, created the Heritage Society in 1982 and began the long, arduous 10-year task of restoring this iconic landmark in Goosegan House. A feasibility study was done. The building was leased for 20 years from the United Church, who still owned it, and the keys were handed over to the Heritage Society in 1982. In 1983, the church was designated as a municipal heritage site. Grants were procured from the BC Heritage Trust, and further monies were provided by all levels of government: the Central Okanagan Foundation, the City of Kelowna, and private donations. The Canada Works program provided $25,000, and Katimavik provided labor through their youth training program. The list of repairs needed was extensive. The floor sagged and a new foundation was needed. The old lath and plaster, as I mentioned before, had to be replaced by gyprock. Insulation had to be added. The wood exterior of the building had to be scraped and painted. A new tower steeple was built, as I mentioned before, by the UBC School of Architecture students. Washrooms and furnaces need to be added. Conservation and improvements continue today. Most of the money from hall rentals goes towards upkeep and conservation of the building. Other improvements to the site include the addition of MacIver House at the back of the property. The MacIver House is situated in the same spot as the original manse, which burned down in the late 1960s. The MacIver House was donated by the MacIver family and is an example of early 20th century salt box style farmhouse, which is more typical on the east coast of Canada. And the new Reed Hall was built in 2000 to provide a hall and kitchen for events. Its design is sympathetic to the Gothic design of the church. Other improvements include the upkeep of the beautiful gardens around the property, which provide colorful backdrops for wedding photos, and shady spots to enjoy the park. More information can be had about Benvoulin Heritage Church and the park on the Central Okanagan Heritage Society website and Facebook page. On the website, you can easily access the Canadian Museum Community Memories Project about the involvement of the Aberdeens in the original building of both Goosekin House and Benvoulin Heritage Church. The title of the two virtual museum exhibits are Benvoulin Church, a building that reflects its community, and Advance with Courage, Lord and Lady Aberdeen in the Okanagan Valley. Of course, we're always grateful for donations, and we are a registered charity, so you can find out how to donate on our website. Thank you for your interest in this heritage site.